When you first meet this partner of yours, it feels like magic. They're playful, charming, adventurous. The kind of person who sweeps you off your feet and makes life feel easy and light. But slowly you realize that all that fun comes at a cost. Because when life gets real, when accountability, responsibility, emotional depth show up, they vanish. They deflect. They sulk. They blame. They attack. You're left carrying the weight of a relationship that never grows while they float off into their fantasy world, Neverland. Today we're talking about Peter Pan, Wendy, and Neverland. Welcome back to the Covert Narcissism podcast, where we cut through the pixie dust of Neverland and talk about the real cost of living with someone who refuses to do the hard work of growing up. Now, we all know the story of Peter Pan, the boy who never wanted to grow up. And in many relationships with covert narcissists, that's exactly what it feels like. You're partnered with someone who is stuck in emotional childhood, refusing to face responsibility and accountability. Now, I want to pause here because while the storybook character is a boy, this dynamic is not limited to men. Some of you listening are living with a covert narcissistic wife, and that's why I'm also using the name Paula Pan. I mention her because too often the conversation about narcissism gets painted only as male behavior. But covert narcissism is not gender specific. Paula Pan can be just as charming, just as playful, just as fun, and just as destructive when reality shows up. She avoids accountability, dodges hard conversations, and keeps her partner stuck in that caretaker role, just like Peter Pan does. So whether you're with Peter Pan or Paula Pan, the story is the same. An adult body carrying the emotional maturity of a child. Now, at first, it's magnetic. They're playful, spontaneous, and adventurous. They make life feel like a ride. But when life gets tough, like I said, when accountability, conflict, or stress show up, Peter or Paula disappear. They shut down. They lash out. They retreat into blame and put their guard up and deflect. Fun is easy. Responsibility is not. And that's why they stay in Neverland. And they drag you in there with them. Covert narcissists often come wrapped in charm, and let's face it, it can be a lot of fun, no doubt. Dancing, traveling, hiking, snuggling at home, date nights, movies, sex. But when life gets tough, when conversations get hard, when emotions come out, this charming and fun-loving individual turns into someone unrecognizable, distant, defensive, reactive, even downright cruel. The moment reality enters the room, they retreat or they attack. This same person who said, let's just have fun, now says, why are you ruining the mood? The one who held your hand on the hike now walks away when you cry. The one who planned romantic weekends suddenly can't handle a simple request to talk about something that hurt you. They shut down, lash out, deflect, blame, minimize. Because fun is easy. Emotions are not. And when real life shows up, they disappear into their fantasy world, leaving you confused, dismissed, and completely alone. When life gets tough, even a little, you'll find emotional immaturity, irresponsibility, and deep avoidance. Now, today I use the analogy of Peter Pan or Paula Pan, who refused to grow up, and I want to talk about what this looks like. These are adults who, number one, avoid accountability at all cost. Covert narcissists are master escape artists when it comes to responsibility. They will twist, deny, distract, and even emotionally manipulate their way out of owning up to anything that reflects poorly on them or might reflect poorly on them. For example, if you point out something hurtful that they said during an argument, they might say, I didn't say that, or you're being too sensitive, instead of simply saying, you're right, I crossed the line, I'm sorry. Or they shift the blame, well, if you hadn't nagged me, I wouldn't have said that. They don't just avoid accountability, they reject the very idea that they should be held accountable at all. But accountability, that's a part of growing up. That's one of those tough parts of life. Number two, they express feelings in inappropriate or immature ways, such as sarcasm, sulking, passive aggressiveness, because they never developed emotional regulation or healthy communication skills. Covert narcissists often express their feelings through childish or manipulative behaviors. They won't tell you that they're upset, they'll just go silent for 3 days. They won't say that they're hurt, they'll just make a sarcastic jab at dinner with friends around to humiliate you. They won't admit that they're jealous, but they'll sabotage your plans or pout like a teenager. Rather than saying, I'm hurt and I need to talk, they'll communicate through digs, withdrawal, and icy coldness, forcing you to chase after them, forcing you to decode them and to fix what they won't even name. Number three is they show little or no effort to take care of themselves, emotionally, physically, or financially. The Peter Pan or Paula Pan covert narcissist wants to be taken care of, not to take care of themselves. They want someone else to do it for them. They avoid therapy. They avoid personal development. They even avoid the basic routines that support adult life. So, for example, emotionally, they won't reflect, learn, or grow. They'll say things like, that's just how I am, or I don't do therapy. Physically, they might neglect their own hygiene, exercise, basic health responsibilities, unless it's about appearance, of course, and then they might go overboard. Financially, they often float from job to job, avoid budgeting, and leave the burden of finances to their partner, while blaming external forces for their, instability. This lack of self-care becomes your problem and your responsibility. Number four, they're going to blame everyone else when life doesn't go their way. This is a hallmark trait of covert narcissism. It's externalizing blame. Nothing is ever their fault. They are always the victim. They didn't get the promotion because their boss was jealous. They're late because traffic was ridiculous, never mind that they left the house 10 minutes late. They lost a friendship because people are too sensitive, not because they were being insensitive. There's always a scapegoat. The system, their parents, their ex, most often you. Number five, they procrastinate endlessly and never follow through. Covert narcissists often live in a fantasy of their potential, not the reality of their effort. They might not put the effort in, but boy, they'll talk a big game about their potential. They talk about what they're going to do, but rarely actually do it. They'll tell you they're going to start their own business, go back to school, write a book, get a new job. But weeks turn into months and months turn into years, with no follow through. They live in the idea of change, not the practice of it. And when you ask, hey, what's happening with that thing you said you were going to do? You're met with defensiveness, excuses, or blame. Number six is they sabotage any grown-up step that might require effort or consistency. Anytime they get close to something that demands accountability, like a job promotion, a deeper relationship commitment, or even their own goals, they somehow blow it up. They show up late to the interview that they claim to be excited about. They sabotage the weekend trip you planned together by picking a fight the night before. They start therapy and quit after 2 sessions because, the therapist didn't understand me. Deep down, they fear responsibility because it threatens their carefully constructed illusion of who they are, their illusion of their own innocence and freedom and their victimhood. Number seven, they claim to value freedom. But is it really freedom? What it is freedom from responsibility. Freedom to say whatever they want and do whatever they want with no consequences. They'll say things like, I just want to live my life without all the pressure. Well, all the pressure are the grown-up things that need to happen as part of adult life. They'll say, why do you always try to control me? I hate being tied down. This isn't healthy autonomy. It's emotional immaturity disguised as independence. They want freedom from growth, accountability, emotional intimacy, consequences, boundaries. They want the freedom to say whatever they feel like, behave however they choose, to react impulsively and without consequences. They claim to value and desire freedom, but this is just another excuse or justification for their bad behavior. Now, they might talk a big game, how no one sees their potential, how they're destined for something greater. But the reality is they don't invest in themselves. They don't show up. They stay stuck and they make it your fault. In their world, Relationships are supposed to be light, easy, and drama-free, but they're the one bringing the drama. They want admiration, but they won't work for connection. And when things get tough, they either vanish emotionally or they explode and blame. This is not someone seeking partnership. This is someone stuck in emotional childhood, dragging you into their fantasy of Neverland, where nothing hard is ever faced and where they don't have to grow up. In the story of Peter Pan, Wendy is the one who goes with him. She tells the stories, cooks the meals, tucks in the lost boys, and brings order to this chaotic world. She becomes the mother figure. And in relationships with covert narcissists, that role gets handed to you. But just like Peter isn't always a boy, Wendy isn't always a girl. Some of you listening are partnered with Paula Pan, and in that case, the caretaker role falls to William. I want to bring William into this story because it matters. Covert narcissism isn't just a male issue. Men end up mothering their wives, too, carrying the weight, smoothing over the moods, holding everything together while Paula refuses to face reality, just like Wendy does for Peter. William does this for Paula. So the roles might shift, but the pattern is the same. One partner refuses to grow up, and the other gets cast as the caretaker, the buffer, the one who keeps the fantasy afloat. Now, here's how this plays out. You, as Wendy or William. Number one, you carry the emotional weight of the relationship. When you're partnered with someone who avoids emotional responsibility, that weight doesn't just disappear. Instead, it just shifts entirely onto you. You're the one thinking about how to repair the last argument. You're the one reading books, listening to podcasts, Googling emotional immaturity in relationships. You're the one trying to understand the triggers for them and for you, the childhood wounds, the attachment styles. You're the one trying to make this better. You become the emotional project manager of the entire relationship. And meanwhile, they go on like everything's fine. Or worse, acting like you're the one creating the problems, even when you're the one trying to work through them. Over time, that weight becomes exhausting, and you do start to break under it. Number two, you manage their moods. In covert narcissistic dynamics, their mood becomes your responsibility. You learn to scan the room like a thermostat, trying to figure out if we need to turn on the air or the heat, trying to figure out what's the temperature in the room so I can make the adjustments, constantly checking where they are emotionally and adjusting yourself to that. If they come home angry, you soften your tone and you avoid eye contact. If they're sulking, you try to cheer them up or give them space and let them be. If they're annoyed, you apologize even though you didn't do anything wrong. If they're happy, you better show up and be present to them and take advantage of, at least some peacefulness. You become a human buffer between them and their world. You actually become a buffer between them and their own emotions, shielding them from discomfort and shielding yourself from their reactions. This is emotional labor on overdrive, and it's never acknowledged. Number three, you walk on eggshells to avoid upsetting them. You learn the hard way that honesty comes at a cost. So you begin editing yourself, carefully choosing your words, rehearsing your tone, avoiding certain topics altogether. You make this mental list of the things: I'll never say that again. I'll never bring that up. I'll never say it that way. I'll never use those words. So, for example, you want to bring up how hurt you were about something that they said last week, but you know how it'll go. They're going to flip it on you. They're going to say you're making a big deal out of nothing, or they're going to shut down completely. So what do? You say nothing. Again, walking on eggshells becomes a way of life. But the cost is your voice and your sense of safety. Number four, you pick up the slack in adult responsibilities. Now, this is a big one. Someone has to handle life. Someone has to do it, and they won't. So in this relationship, that someone is you. You manage the bills. You take care of the budget. Though I do recognize, I do want to say this, that those of you who are dealing with financial abuse, this is the complete opposite for you. You make the appointments, you handle the schedule and the calendar, you follow up with the kids' school, you take care of all their activities and sports, you plan the vacations, grocery shop, arrange the holidays, fix the printer, clean up after their messes. You do all of these things, and they do exactly what? They might present themselves as laid back or go with the flow, But behind that mask is a person who refuses to show up for the adult tasks that keep life moving forward. Or they may take credit for the very things that you're getting done. They might say something like, yeah, it's a lot of work keeping up with the kids' schedule. It's exhausting, even though they don't do any of it. That's maddening. It would drive you crazy. You're the one doing all the things. It's not a partnership anymore, and it becomes an intense burden. Number 5, you silence your own needs in order to keep the peace. You learn that your needs rock the boat. So little by little, you set them aside. You stop asking for affection because you've been told that you're needy. You stop bringing up how overwhelmed you are because they say, oh, you're being negative. You stop dreaming out loud because they always poke holes in your hopes. You shrink to fit the shape of what won't upset them. Listen to that again. You shrink yourself to fit the shape of what? Of what won't upset them. But over time, you lose sight of what you even want, your desires, your dreams, your needs, because you've trained yourself to not have any. Number 6, you stay quiet to avoid being abandoned. Whether it's emotional withdrawal, the threat of leaving, the cold wall of silence, covert narcissists know how to use abandonment, subtle or overt, as a tool of control. They don't have to say, I'll leave you. They just have to shut down, disappear into their phone, sleep in another room after an argument. The message is clear. If you speak up, you lose me. So you keep the peace. You keep it quiet. You keep your pain hidden. Because the fear of abandonment becomes stronger than your need for honesty. But that silence is painful. And it costs you your voice, your truth, your reality, your perceptions. You try to be the safe space. You try to be the stable one, the forgiving one. You tell yourself that they just need time and that maybe your love and your patience for them will inspire them to grow. But the truth is they don't want to grow. And the more you overfunction, the more they underfunction. You become so busy proving your love to them that you forget what it's like to feel loved. Wendy doesn't speak her truth because she's afraid Peter will leave her behind, and maybe you've felt that too. So you take over the adult role in the relationship, not because you want to, but because someone has to. And here's the truth. Wendy's care does not make Peter grow up. It just enables him to stay a child. In fact, they eventually part ways and Wendy grows up and Peter Pan never does. Peter Pan comes back to visit, comes back years later. He's still the same. And Wendy has grown up into adult life. The fantasy land where the covert narcissist lives is Never Never Land. And they take you there repeatedly. It's the land where they don't grow up and nothing ever gets resolved. Living with a covert narcissist means that difficult conversations, they vanish into thin air. Arguments, disagreements, even just times of differing opinions or tough topics, moments of cruelty, they all get sent to what I call Never Never Land. Never to be talked about, never to be brought up again, never to see the light of day, never to get resolved, never to get heard. Let's go through some of these. So number 1, never to be talked about. You bring it up gently, carefully, cautiously, with empathy, and they change the subject, or they sigh, and they huff, they roll their eyes. Maybe they say, why are you always dwelling on the past? Or, here we go again. There's no actual space for the conversation. It's shut down before it ever gets started. There's no willingness to hear you out. No back and forth, give and take, mutual respect and mutual reflection. This topic is effectively shut down before it even starts. Their silence and their deflection and their blame, that becomes the conversation. And what do you learn? You learn next time, don't bring it up. Put another one in Never Never Land. Number 2, never to be processed. In healthy relationships, painful moments don't disappear into thin air. They're processed. That means talking through them, opening up and giving each other the space to unpack your own emotions, even if they're negative, especially if they're negative. It means identifying some of the root causes and moving toward repair. But here, in relationships with Peter Pan and Paula Pan, that step doesn't exist. They hurt you on Friday and you try to talk to them on Saturday, but they act like it never happened. or they accuse you of making everything worse. Without processing, pain just sits inside of you, stuck, swirling, unvalidated, unmet, unresolved. You feel like you're carrying the weight of something that should have been shared, but instead you are completely alone with it. Number 3, never to be acknowledged. Sometimes all we want to hear is, yes, your feelings mattered, or yes, that happened and it hurt you. But you won't get that here. Covert narcissists rewrite reality all the time, and they do it like in real time. They minimize, deny, deflect. They act like you misunderstood or overreacted. They might humiliate you in front of friends, and the next day they're cheerful, making breakfast, asking what you want to do this weekend without ever mentioning what happened. And when you bring it up, they just say, I was just joking. Why are you being so dramatic? When really what you want to hear is, hey, I was joking. I'm sorry it landed so hard. The pain that you experience never gets named. You're not given that space. And what isn't acknowledged can't be healed. Which brings us to number 4, never to be healed. Because the pain is never talked about, never processed, and never acknowledged, it also never heals. It lingers. It compounds. It multiplies. It resurfaces in the next argument, the next shutdown, the next silent treatment. You may try to heal it on your own through journaling, venting, therapy, coaching. There's tools you can do to do some of the healing on your own. But as long as you're still in the dynamic, the wounds keep piling up. And so the wounds keep getting reopened. Healing, complete healing, it can't happen in a space that refuses to admit that there's been harm. Number 5 is it can never be forgiven. Not only are you never forgiven for your mistakes, whether they're real or perceived, you aren't forgiven because they can't give you that space to be, anything less than their version of perfect. You're not allowed to say things you could have said better or do things you could have done differently. So you're never forgiven, but their mistakes aren't forgiven either because they're never owned. They accuse you of things that you never did, or they bring up old wounds as weapons. They say, that they've moved on, but they still hold on to resentment like a secret weapon in their emotional arsenal. True forgiveness requires mutual ownership. It requires being able to give each other the space to be less than perfect. And without that, everything gets muddy. Everything becomes accusations and ammunition and conditional. You end up feeling like you're constantly auditioning for their approval, trying to earn a clean slate that will never be given. And this brings us to number 6. Never to be forgotten. Deep inside of you. Here's the irony. While they act like nothing ever happened, it did happen. They say we need to forgive and forget, but these two things can't help happen without resolution. Your body remembers. Your nervous system remembers. Your heart remembers. Your mind remembers. You carry these invisible wounds in the tone of your voice, in your hesitation to speak up, in your fear of conflict, in your spiraling self-doubt. These experiences don't disappear. They go underground, buried deep in the silent ache of never, never land. Here's the truth. What's buried alive stays alive. And until it's faced, it will keep you stuck. It creates an emotional black hole and a life where nothing has resolution. It's like trying to live a life that's being constantly erased all the time in real time. And they just want to fly back to Never Never Land, so off they go. But you're left holding all the emotional residue of conversations that should have happened, but never did. It's not just frustrating, it's gaslighting. Because you begin to question if your memories are accurate. You start gaslighting yourself. We've talked about that before. You start questioning if your needs are valid, if your pain was even real in the first place. This is how they stay in control, because if nothing is ever addressed, nothing is ever their fault. And you're left with a lifetime of unresolved hurt, trying to keep the story together, trying to keep the fantasy world together, trying to keep the happy ending to the fairy tale, while they keep pretending like nothing ever happened. Here's what I want you to hear today. You do not have to stay in Never Never Land. You do not have to keep playing Wendy or William. And you do not have to keep waiting for Peter Pan or Paula Pan to grow up. You deserve emotional safety. You deserve a life where reality is acknowledged, not erased. You deserve a space where you get to grow with another person and you grow into adulthood. If you're ready to take that next step, to grow, to heal, to stop performing in someone else's fantasy world, I am here to walk with you, and check out my coaching services at covertnarcissism.com. Your story matters. You matter. And it's time to write a new story, your story, outside of Never Never Land. I wish you so much peace on your journey of healing. The information provided by Renee Swanson, Covert Narcissism Podcast, and CNG Life Coaching is for educational purposes only and is not to be used for diagnosis purposes. It is not intended to be a substitute for clinical care. Please consult a healthcare provider for guidance specific to your case. This material discusses narcissism in general. Renee shares stories from her personal experience as well as from those that she has worked with for several years. Her material does not claim that any specific person has narcissism and should not be used to refer to any specific person as having narcissism. Permission is not granted to link to or repost this material to support an allegation or support a claim that any specific person is a narcissist. That would be an unauthorized misuse of the material and the information provided. Thank you.